And speaking of the trade deadline, while obviously that's passed, the deadline has last week, we learned actually what almost happened, or at least was in the mix to happen prior to the deadline. Albert Breer, as Ingraven tweeted out here on the Amazon Prime broadcast, mentioned that the Ravens got outbid for Marshawn Lattimore, and a deal with Calais Campbell fell through at the last minute. Here he is speaking on what happened earlier this week when the trade deadline, Tuesday, 4 p.m. Eastern, came to a screeching halt.
Teams that didn't get Lattimore, one of them is right there where you're sitting, Carissa. The Ravens actually offered a third-round pick for Lattimore. Obviously, they get outbid by the Commanders. And then there was another deal that they fell short on. They almost brought Calais Campbell back. That deal fell through at the last minute. And as for the guys that they have brought in, Tre'Davious White, an interesting nugget on the deal to go and get him. White actually agreed to remove all the playtime incentives from his contract to facilitate the deal to the Ravens. He should make his debut for Baltimore against Pittsburgh a week from Sunday.
So a deal was in place for Calais Campbell, which would have been somewhat of a boost for the interior defensive line and reuniting with the Walter Payton Man of the Year and just a veteran glue guy that already had a stint and a successful stint in Baltimore. That fell through, and they didn't give enough for Marshawn Lattimore, who goes to the Commanders. And Washington was willing to sacrifice draft compensation, something that the Ravens refused to do. They haven't always refused it. Certainly not in 2022 when they gave up a second for Roquan. But the Saints are getting a Washington third rounder, a Washington fourth rounder, and a sixth in exchange for Lattimore and a fifth rounder. At some point, while I totally respect and admire the Ravens front office for sticking to their guns, having a philosophy from a team building standpoint that has worked for them in the past, I'm sure it'll work for them moving forward. It's got me thinking that at times, when you are desperate the way they are right now to fix their defense, and when you are in an all-in win-now mode like the Ravens are at this moment, you got to be willing sometimes to sacrifice. I felt like the Ravens missed their mark. I hope Tre'Davious White proves me and everybody else wrong. But Marshawn Lattimore was the needle-moving acquisition. Would I have wanted Za'Darius? Of course you want Za'Darius Smith, but at the same time, there's an in-division component there, and I can understand why that was probably unrealistic. Washington gave up a lot to get Lattimore. But this feels like a miss if you're Eric DeCosta. The team building and the draft philosophy and the way that they covet their picks is one thing. And I think it's why they're one of the most stable, consistent organizations in the league. But I can't ignore this era of football that they're in right now. There's a window right now. And sure, as long as Lamar Jackson is around, that window will be open. But that window's not always open. And Lamar's a seventh-year player now. And just as any deal does and any situation gets hairy and trickier when your franchise quarterback is on a mega deal the way Lamar is, team building gets trickier and trickier. And nothing's guaranteed. Health isn't guaranteed. Next year, tomorrow, damn it, is not even guaranteed. I wish the Ravens were willing to part with some of their 11 draft picks that they are well stocked up for come 2025 in April. Captain Hard says, do we start White at cornerback just to try something? Never know. Maybe he just needed a new start. Who's White? Am I having one of my no sleep brain farts right now? Who? Oh, Tre'Davious. Start Tre'Davious at corner? Captain. Ooh, I don't know. You look at the numbers, and that would concern me. Again, he's 13 months removed. I got the numbers right here. Keep in mind, Tre'Davious White is 13 months removed from an Achilles tear. And the numbers in the 4 games that he did play with the Rams aren't great from a PFF perspective. You'd be rolling the dice there to give him that kind of entrust him, I should say, to entrust him to that level. Mitchell says the offense is great, but too much pressure. Good quarterback death by 1,000 cuts, flats, checkdowns, etc. AKA 6 to 9 minute drives like the first half. So disheartening. Jemmy93 says all these stats are why we're harping on the defense, because if this continues, we're looking at an early playoff exit, and all these accolades are for nothing. Ian, you're right. The Rams did rush Tre'Davious back probably sooner than they would have liked. So maybe he wasn't fully healthy for those games, and so maybe those numbers are slightly skewed. But the Ravens just aren't they're not in a situation right now where they can just make risky bets like that.